Hi guys. So I promised Anthony, one of the guys in comic racing with me, that I would make a suggestion on a lap that he posted and wanted feedback on, and I wanted to wait until after the Snetterton race was done because it's going to be a bit too much to do on short to make the adjustment on short notice. So Anthony, that's what this is, and I thought this would be the best way to do it, so I could really break down what I'm talking about. And I'm gonna get to your lap here in just a second, but I want to preface it by saying that what I'm going to suggest that you work on and have a better understanding of is rotating the car. Okay, and the reason it is so important is this. So here's the first few corners of Snetterton from the overhead view, and in a GT3 car, largely you make your time on the straights because GT3 cars are very heavy, very pitch sensitive, and difficult to balance because of their weight. They shift around a lot. Compare that with a Formula One car with enormous amounts of downforce, and they can take ungodly speeds in the corners. You don't have that much leeway in a GT3 car, so you have to be able to maximize every single straight. So if you look at the amount of time that you spend on this straight between 1 and 2, between 2 and 3, between 3 and 4, that on the actual straights is where you're going to spend the vast majority of your time in a GT3 car. In a way, the corners are nothing there but to get in your way and prevent you from being full throttle as long as possible. But the goal remains the same, and that is to maximize the amount of speed you carry onto a straight and all the way down it. And the only way that you can do that is if you get onto the throttle as quickly and as fully as the corner permits in the car you're driving, right? So in a way, it's probably not an overstatement to say that on every track and virtually every corner, your priority should always be to get the car into a position as quickly as you can where you can go back to full throttle. Okay? Now, I say that because that brings us to rotation, rotating the car. What does that mean? That means that if I zoom in here, okay, so the corner is what's preventing you from staying on full throttle, right? You have to get from point A at the entry to point B at the exit, and whoever can negotiate that the best kind of wins for the most part, right? But in order to do that, you have to get your car from one orientation where it's facing this direction up the pit straight into another orientation where you're facing over here to the right. Okay, very simple stuff, very basic. Um, it is easy to think about that as turning the car in the corner, but that's not exactly right, not for the purposes of racing. Turning the car is what you do on the street when you're in your passenger car. Rotating the car is what you do when you're negotiating a corner on a racetrack. And what you're looking for is that point of rotation that once you achieve it, you're at a point where you can attack the throttle and start taking advantage of the straight that you're about to hit. Okay, so when I'm talking about rotation, I'm talking about changing the orientation of the car so that you can attack the throttle. And whoever rotates the car better, quicker, right, generally is in the position first to get back on the throttle and take advantage of the following straight. Okay, so usually it's the difference between a driver who is a second or two faster than another driver, is their ability to rotate the car in the corner. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a comparison between the lap that you put up for us and Jeff Spangler's pole lap from the Division One race on Monday night, and we really only need to take a look at the first 4 corners, and I think you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So let's get your lap up here. And we're going to talk a little bit about trail braking, but in a way, I want you to think of trail braking as a means to an end rather than a goal unto itself. Trail braking is largely a tool in your toolbox to allow you to rotate the car faster and earlier so that you can get back on the throttle. So first of all, turn one. Let's take a look at where you finish braking. Okay, so you are completely off of the brakes at this point, right? Now you'll see a significant difference between that and what Spangler does. Okay, so he's off the throttle much closer to the apex than you are. Why? Because his trail braking phase is longer because he is using the brakes and trail braking, the technique of trail braking, in order to help him rotate the car. Okay, so if you look at the difference, not just where you are positionally on the track as far as when you both come off the brakes, but also look at the orientation of the car, how much it has rotated by the time you come off the brakes. So take a look at Jeff's right here. And then look at the difference between that and how much you have rotated the car, right? You're still oriented much more towards the center of the track at this point, which means that all of the turning basically that you're going to do from here on is going to be done while coasting, and you haven't used the brakes as much to rotate the car, which means that at this point you simply don't have as much rotation done as what Jeff does. Not surprising, by the way. That's why he's so fast, is he's extremely good at it, right? Now, the other thing I want you to watch, though, is how much more. Here's the effect of that. Okay, so because you haven't accomplished as much rotation in the corner, then that means that you have more rotation that you still need to do. So you're rotating, you're rotating, you're rotating. Um, because you didn't get the rotation, it also forces the car a little bit into some understeer, which means you miss both of the apexes. You're still trying to rotate the car, okay? Now let's see when you get back on full throttle. Okay, so right there. And I think that's actually pretty close to the same spot where Jeff winds up as far as getting back on the throttle. But you'll see how this technique makes a much bigger difference in some of the following corners. Okay, so so he has rotated the car more is the point that I'm trying to make, and he's used the brake in order to accomplish that, which allows him to attack the throttle. Now if we go up to the next corners, you'll see that pattern repeat, but it really starts to have a substantial effect on what you are able to do on exit. Okay, so let's go up to the end of your braking zone first again. See, there's a trail braking, okay? But your trail braking stops right there and you're back into a coasting phase again, right? And matter of fact, I suppose while we're here, just note. Obviously, you're not nearly as far into the corner as he's going to be here in a second. But note how much rotation you have done by the time you come off of the brakes, right? Because that's really what we're chasing here is rotation. Once again, he is going to extend his braking phase, his trail braking phase, substantially longer. In this case, because it's a hairpin, he's going to run it all the way up into the apex of the corner, essentially. Okay, so he doesn't come off of the brake completely until until almost all the way through the quarter, you know, and he can do that because this is a very slow hairpin. So it's naturally going to mean that his trail braking phase will last about as long as you'll see on any corner. The result of that, though, is that at this point, he has enough rotation done of the car that he can go back and attack the throttle immediately, right? If he didn't, if he still had the car pointed, you know, a little bit to the left, he'd have to go into a coasting phase or something along those lines and rotate it those 2, 3, 4, 5 degrees more before he can get back on and attack the throttle. So let's see where he actually gets back to full throttle. Right there, okay? So before he even hits the end of the red and white striped curb here, he's back on full throttle because the car has been rotated enough, right? Now, in your case, watch how long it takes you to get back to full throttle because you have to do so much more rotation um, in the second half of the corner. And just look at the wheel. How much steering input you have to use. Okay, so that's right there is basically when you were able to get back to full throttle, significantly after him. So he has started building speed long before you did, relatively speaking. And all of that speed that he is gaining, he is going to carry down this entire straight. You will not. So you're losing time to him from this point on down the straight. Regardless of everything else, this is costing you time right here because you didn't get the car rotated enough. Now, the other thing I mentioned is the amount of steering input, right? Since you are not using the brake to rotate the car as much, you have to use the steering wheel more in a case like this. Compare that to Jeff, and we'll see what kind of maximum steering angle he achieves. Okay, so take a look at the difference. It may not look like much, you know. Maybe you're using 5 to 10 degrees more steering input than he is, right? But the fact that you have to means that that you cannot get back on the throttle as early. You're probably both scrubbing speed in the middle of the corner um, and delaying your ability to get back on the throttle because it's simply going to take you longer to get through the corner. Now, here's an interesting thing to look at while we're doing that. Let's take a look at where are we at? Let's see what your minimum speed is through the corner. 63. Jeff is much slower than that. And I'm guessing that's probably his minimum speed or very close to it. '51. So his minimum speed in turn two is what, 12 kilometers an hour less than what yours is? Are you, yeah, you're on kilometers per hour too. Okay, so he is actually going slower in the corner than you are. You are faster at the apex than he is. The difference is he spends less time there because he rotates the car in a much smaller amount of time. You, on the other hand, are going to have more speed right there. So if you compared your lap traces, the data, in Motec between the two of you at the apex in the middle of the corner, you would actually gain time on him, but then you would lose all of that plus more on the subsequent straight because he simply shortens the corner, right? You make it longer by virtue of not being able to rotate the car as quickly. Let's go to the third corner. You'll see that pretty commonly, I think. Not all corners. I think it's most obvious in very slow corners like hairpins, where a faster driver than you may actually have a lower cornering speed than what you do, and it's because they're attacking the corner in a completely different way than what you are, and maximizing the following straight. Okay, turn 3. Okay, there you're off the brakes. Okay, there's where Jeff comes off the brakes. Okay, and look, you can tell how much later that is, comparatively speaking. How much longer he is using the brakes to help to turn the car, right? Um, the other thing that I want you to see before I look at the exit is, and um, this is a question of experience. So this is not something that you're going to be able to do initially, but in a way, it explains a lot about the difference between what you're doing right now versus the really high-level drivers, right? Because they are comfortable enough, that their skill is advanced enough that they can modulate their brake to do what they need to do beyond just slowing down, but rotating the car, right? Then what you're going to see here is you're going to see Jeff mid corner use just a small touch on the brake to rotate the car slightly more. So brake, turn, trail, feels pretty good. But then he gets to right about here and he realizes, nope, I need just a little bit more rotation before I attack the throttle, right? So he uses that tiny little touch in order to achieve rotation. He's not looking to scrub speed at that point. He's looking to rotate the car. Okay, so while we're here, let's take a look as a result where he gets back to full throttle. Right there. Okay, again, short of that curb. And let's see where you come out. See your hesitation on the throttle there? There. So it's not until that point where you're able to really go back. And now look at the difference in the position. So you've already substantially exited the corner before you're able to get back to full throttle, and once again, that's costing you speed on the subsequent straight. And last corner we'll look at, turn 4. And once again, you do trail brake. All right, there it is, right there. And right there is where you finish your trail braking phase. And once again, this is a slower hairpin type corner, which means he's going to carry his braking all the way up to the apex or very close. Right there, okay? Okay, so what does that mean? That means that there is going to be yet again a difference in when you are able to get back on the throttle, right? Because you're going to have a much longer coasting phase because you still have so much rotation that you have to do. You'll start going back on the throttle, but it's going to take you a long time to get there because the car's not straight enough yet. You know, you're still trying to rotate it. And probably the grip of that curb had something to do with delaying you, but I think it's pretty obvious that you can see that that it takes you a long time to get back onto the throttle. And now Jeff. Bam, he's there, right? Before he's out of the corner completely, he's already back to full throttle and taking advantage of all of that extra speed that he's gained over you as a result on the subsequent straight. Okay, so rotation, rotation, rotation. Now, what I want to do is I want to try and give you an idea on how to start working on that and learning how to make rotating the car both a priority and a habit. Okay, there's a drill that I'm going to give you that I want you to try, and I think it will help you start going in the right direction as far as that goes. Okay, so I'm at Barcelona, and I think this is a good place for you to do this drill. Both because it has a lot of different types of corners on the track, so it's a good one from the standpoint of technique. And since it is our next race after the break, it's a good place to start practicing on. So first thing I want you to do is I want you to watch this lap. What are we doing? From overhead. Okay, the thing I want you to notice about this lap, before you start looking at any of the inputs or anything along those lines from the inside of the cockpit, is essentially look at how normal this lap goes. Okay, the lines that I'm taking are all the lines that I would take when I was either doing quali or a race. Or whoop, that's the wrong one. It is that one. That will make sense here in a minute when I explain the drill, because it's going to happen a lot to you. The lines that I'm going to take on this lap are all the same lines I would take during qualifying or during a race. So nothing changes. What is going to change is what you are feeling when you do this drill. But the goal is to do this drill and essentially feel the movement of the car while you're doing the lap. Right? Nothing crazy about this lap. The rest of it is essentially the same thing. So here's the drill that I want you to do. I want you to set up a single player session at Barcelona or wherever. You can even go back to Snetterton and try it. Although I think Sector 3 might make it a little bit tricky to start with. Pick whichever setup you choose. I don't care which one. If you have set up already, use it. If not, just use the aggressive setup. And here's what I want you to change. I want you to change the aero platform and the brake bias. So since you're driving the Honda, it's going to be identical to what I'm doing right here. Ride height in the front all the way down. Ride height in the back, maxed out. Wing, minimum. Brake bias, all the way back. I want you to create an inherently unbalanced car that you would never dream of driving in a million years for qualifying or for the race. What is this going to do? It's going to reveal a couple of things to you, right? In order to rotate the car quickly, you have to be able to develop a sense for the balance of that car. How the weight is shifting around and moving around from one tire to another so that you can maximize the grip of that tire to take advantage of it, okay? This drill is designed to force you to feel that balance and that motion of the car. When you do a setup, right, for a race, you will typically set it up to your current skill level, right? Makes perfect sense. When you go into a race, you want to go as fast as you can, and as fast as you can is limited by what you are capable of doing right now. That's not the purpose of this drill. The purpose of this drill is to reveal something new to you so that you can then go and work on it. And in order to do that, we use an extreme platform to accomplish it. So this car, when you drive it, is going to be unbelievably unstable, and you are going to spin and crash any number of times before you really start to feel what I'm talking about. However, what it's also going to force you to do is it's going to force you to use the steering wheel a lot less, okay? And that's really what I'm after here. You are going to have to be much more gentle with both your steering input and your brake input in order to get the car around the track successfully. Because if you try to overdo it even a little bit, you're absolutely going to lose the car, right? So what does that look like? I'll show you the lap that took me about a dozen laps to kind of get to the point where I was starting to get comfortable with the car. And this is a drill that that I started doing well over a year ago, I think, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that. And I will come back to it periodically when I feel like I'm being too ham-fisted with the car, you know, and just kind of slamming the brake or what have you, and really not controlling the balance of the car very well. So don't hesitate to come back and try this again at a later date. Mix it in wherever you feel like you need to. Oops, that's the one I just did. Why am I at Indianapolis? Okay, so one of the things that you'll notice is how little I use the steering wheel on this lap, and this is using that exaggerated setup that I told you to use. You'll notice that all the inputs have to be very small and gradual in order for me to frankly hang on to the car and get it around the track in the same manner that I kind of always want to. You're not going to be fast, by the way. This is going to be, it's going to feel dirt slow to begin with. It took me about, I think, like I said, about a dozen laps before I could start getting down and running laps in the 48s, even with an frankly unusable setup like this. You'll be surprised how quickly it comes to you. What this car does when it's like this is it wants to rotate. It is begging to rotate. And in a way, you are having to figure out how to allow it to rotate instead of trying to force it to rotate, which I think is kind of the mental block, you know, that we tend to find ourselves in when we're still learning these skills, you know. You tend to just kind of try to mash everything together and force the car to do certain things, when there are techniques that you can use in order to just help the car do what you want it to, as opposed to trying to, you know, ram the car down the track's throat. Okay, so that's the drill I want you to do. My suggestion is that you run laps with that undrivable setup until you are comfortable enough to do something like in the 40s. You know, I think if you can do that, then you're starting to get a feel for what it is that I'm trying to get you to feel. The um, the the end goal of this is so that when you get back in your race setup car, you will be able to take some of that feeling with you and find that you have better, more fine control over how the car rotates, and that you're actively thinking about rotation and what you can do to promote it. Once you start thinking that, then I think you'll find out that your inputs begin changing on their own, and you'll start experimenting with different ways that you can use the brakes or the accelerator, or a little less or a little more steering here, in order to get the car rotated much faster in the corner, which allows you to get back on the throttle much quicker, just like Spangler does, you know. So that's my suggestion for you. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, but otherwise, let me know how it goes. See you guys.